She had a valid ticket, a Diamond Elite card. She arrived early, dressed like a professional. But still, on Flight 3921, someone looked at her and decided she didn't belong. 5 minutes later, they'd learn exactly who she was, and they'd regret everything. "Ma'am, I'm afraid this seat is usually reserved for our VIP clientele." Celeste Morgan looked up from her seat, 1D, front row, first class, her leather tote tucked beneath her feet, boarding pass still in hand. Calm, composed, she raised an eyebrow. "I am VIP," she said, handing the ticket without hesitation. The flight attendant, Brittany, took the pass. Her eyes scanned it quickly, then flicked up. Diamond Elite, 1D, no mistake. But instead of stepping aside, Brittany paused. A sharp voice cut in from behind. "That's my seat." She's probably confused. Celeste turned her head slightly. Lydia Whitford stood there, platinum hair styled to perfection, gray designer suit, crisp, oversized Hermes bag hanging off her wrist like a trophy. "I always sit in 1D, Lydia said. "Everyone on this route knows that. It's basically mine." It wasn't just a correction, it was a challenge. Celeste didn't respond. She didn't need to. She sat straighter and waited. Brittany stepped in again, her smile a little tighter now. "Miss Morgan, I understand you booked the seat, but Miss Whitford is one of our legacy clients. We usually prioritize her comfort on this route. So, I booked in advance, paid in full, followed policy. But her comfort takes precedence over my reservation?" Celeste asked. Brittany hesitated. "We'd be happy to offer you 5A. It's still in first class. Same service, same amenities." "It's not the same," Celeste replied, her tone steady. "And I'm not moving." The cabin had gone quiet. A few passengers shifted. One man in row 2 subtly lifted his phone, already recording. A woman whispered, "She has the right seat." Lydia crossed her arms. "I've been flying Skylux longer than she's probably been out of grad school," she scoffed. Then, without lowering her voice, she added, "This seat isn't for people like her." The sentence hung in the air, heavy and cold. No one said a word. Celeste blinked once, not in shock, in clarity. Then, she stood. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She simply gathered her things and stepped into the aisle. As she walked past row 3, someone muttered, "That was wrong." At row 4, a man leaned toward his wife and said, "She had the diamond card. I saw it." Celeste reached row 5A and sat down. Not stiff, not shaken, just deliberate. She opened her laptop. Her fingers moved swiftly. "Confirm full acquisition of Skylux Airlines. Effective immediately. Activate Personnel Authority Clause. Extend non-rehire bans to Jetlink, Aero West, Nova Fleet." She hit send, closed the laptop, folded her hands in her lap. They had taken her seat. They had no idea she now owned the plane, and their futures were no longer guaranteed. Light spilled through the oval windows, painting the cabin in pale morning gold. The hush of boarding chatter gave way to a soft mechanical hum as Flight 3921 pushed back from Vancouver International. For most passengers, this would be a smooth, uneventful journey to Washington, D.C. But up front, in the first-class cabin, the real story was just beginning. Celeste Morgan sat back in her well-worn 1D seat, watching the flight attendant Brittany adjust the overhead air vent above Lydia Whitford. The contrast couldn't have been more stark. Lydia, platinum-haired and impeccably dressed, radiated entitlement in every measured movement, tapping her manicured nails on the fold-down table, smoothing the lapels of her dove-gray designer suit. Beside her, Brittany moved with a practiced deference, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial murmur. "Miss Whitford," Brittany said in that clipped, polished tone, "we'll have your Dom Perignon chilled to the perfect temperature. Anything else to make your flight more comfortable?" Lydia's smile was a gentle curve of approval. "That would be lovely. And do keep an eye on that gentleman in 1D. He seems out of place." Celeste watched them, unflinching, but inside, her chest tightened. This was more than a seating dispute. It was a performance of privilege, a demonstration that some people could bend the rules simply by uttering the right name. And those rules included sidelining anyone who didn't fit their narrow image. The cabin itself was an homage to luxury. Cream leather seats, polished chrome accents, and soft plush carpeting that muffled even the click of shoes. But luxury here was a facade. Underneath lay an unspoken hierarchy that favored a certain clientele: white, wealthy, well-connected. Celeste remembered how this same hierarchy had forced her to prove herself again and again in boardrooms and on trading floors. And once more, it was playing out at 35,000 feet. A discreet beep on her watch reminded her of the time: 9:03 a.m. She needed to stay focused. Her real mission today wasn't comfort or champagne. It was observation. In 2 hours, Morgan Equinox would finalize its majority stake in Skylux Airlines. She had boarded this flight to see how the crew actually treated big clients when no executives were watching. What she was learning so far was illuminating. Brittany returned with a chilled glass. "Here you are, Miss Whitford." She slipped the flute into Lydia's hand, then shot Celeste a polite nod. Polite. The word had lost its meaning here. Celeste leaned back. "Thank you," she murmured, though her words were aimed more at herself than at the cabin staff. She examined Lydia out of the corner of her eye. Everything about Lydia's posture screamed confidence. Perfect posture, chin slightly raised, gaze deliberately sweeping the cabin. She was used to being seen, used to having people step aside, used to commands disguised as casual remarks. Celeste opened her laptop and let the screen light her face. She typed a quick note in her journal app. Privilege is a quiet thing. It doesn't shout. It whispers in gestures. She sipped the water in the glass at her tray table, savoring the coolness, a small anchor to keep her mind sharp. Around her, other passengers chatted softly, most too politely occupied with their screens and magazines to notice the tension. A young businessman 2 rows back smiled at her as he recognized her seat assignment. But when their eyes met, he looked away, anxious to avoid drawing attention. That's the real power of privilege, she thought. It silences even the witnesses. Then Brittany leaned in again, offering a soft apology. "I'm sorry you had to move, Miss Morgan. 5A has the same amenities. We'll ensure it's equally comfortable." Celeste smiled, a small, knowing curve. "I'm grateful," she replied, voice smooth. "But next time, please follow the reservation. It's what keeps this experience fair for everyone." Brittany nodded, her expression a mix of relief and unease. Celeste recognized it well. The moment a subordinate realizes her mistake, but can't undo it. She could see the gears turning in Brittany's head, wondering how she'd explain this to her supervisor. Across the aisle, Lydia raised her glass and took a deliberate sip, eyes locked on Celeste. There was no warmth there, only the cold calculation of someone who saw people as roles rather than human beings. Celeste felt a familiar spark of righteous indignation. She had faced this many times, being reduced to an archetype, othered by someone who believed their status was unassailable. Celeste tapped a few keys, pulling up her boarding confirmation and loyalty profile on her screen. Diamond Elite since inception, with a dozen complimentary upgrades next year already guaranteed. Every policy precisely followed. She closed the laptop gently, savoring the control. For the next several minutes, she sat in silence, letting the engines drone and the murmur of polished conversation fill the space. It felt surreal, how such elegance could mask such blatant discrimination. But this hush would break, soon. Brittany would remember this mistake. The other passengers would talk, and Morgan Equinox's quiet takeover would begin. By the time the captain's voice came over the intercom, welcoming everyone aboard and reminding them of seatbelt regulations, Celeste was ready. She folded her arms and met Brittany's eyes in the reflection of the window, a silent promise passing between them. Observation complete. Next, action. They were just minutes away from landing in DC, and already the stakes were higher than any business deal Celeste had negotiated. In this cabin, she was both guest and observer, powerless and omnipotent, all at once. And she intended to ensure that when the real moment came, everyone would remember precisely who held the power. The soft hum of the cabin settled into a low murmur as Flight 3921 leveled off. Celeste Morgan sat quietly in seat 5A, her gaze fixed on the gleaming overhead bins, but her mind was far away. She wasn't just any passenger tucked into first-class luxury. She was the mastermind quietly reshaping an entire airline industry. Born and raised in Boston, Massachusetts, Celeste had grown up watching her father sketch blueprints of runway expansions and airport terminals on napkins in their modest kitchen. He was an engineer whose work rarely made headlines, but whose influence quietly shaped how people traveled. She inherited that blend of vision and discretion. Today, at 47, she was CEO and founder of Morgan Equinox Capital, a private investment firm managing over $36 billion in assets, with a legacy of transforming undervalued transportation companies into industry leaders. Her leather tote rested beside her, a gift from her grandmother, who had raised her on stories of quiet dignity in the face of adversity. Celeste traced her fingers along the worn strap, recalling how she had climbed corporate ladders in boardrooms dominated by men twice her age. She remembered the looks that said, "You're too young," "You're too female," and, unspoken but searing, "You're too black." Every underestimation fueled her resolve. Today's flight was no exception. Skylux Airlines had no idea that the unassuming woman in 5A was the very person who would soon control their destiny. She'd boarded early, not for champagne or a window view, but to observe how this airline treated its legacy clients. What she'd seen so far was a bureaucratic performance of privilege, thinly veiled by courtesy. Celeste opened her notebook app and reviewed her own notes. Executed preliminary stake acquisition, 15 percentage points confirmed. All due diligence complete. Target control threshold, 51% by landing. She tapped a pencil against her lips, a habit from her days drafting infrastructure proposals. Every major acquisition she'd led started in quiet confidence, then unfolded with decisive clarity. Rarely did she make a scene. Her power lay in precision. A subtle chime on her smartwatch drew her attention. A secure message popped up. Morgan Equinox Capital to acquire 51% of Skylux Airlines at closing, board meeting scheduled upon arrival. Celeste allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. The gears were in motion. She looked down the aisle toward the front. Brittany was busy smoothing a blanket for Lydia, whose expression in the seat just ahead radiated triumph. The contrast struck Celeste. One woman preening in entitlement, the other steeled in silent purpose. Despite the luxury all around, plush leather, curated menus, ambient lighting, Celeste had learned long ago that privilege could be a veneer. True influence grew in boardrooms and war rooms, in whispered negotiations and carefully drafted contracts. She'd built Morgan Equinox Capital by buying stakes in companies that others dismissed as too entrenched or too traditional. She relished turning those dismissals into triumphs. Her own company's offices occupied 2 floors of a historic brick building overlooking the Beacon Hill neighborhood in Boston. From there, she oversaw teams of analysts, legal counsel, and market strategists. She had cultivated a reputation for discretion. You never saw the hand that moved the pieces, only the outcome. The flight attendant returned to Celeste's row with a bottle of still water and a warm smile. "Miss Morgan, anything else I can bring you at the moment?" "Thank you, Brittany," Celeste replied smoothly. "A glass of ginger lemonade would be lovely when you have a moment." Brittany nodded. Right away. As the attendant departed, Celeste leaned forward and tapped a line in her notebook. "Observe. Crew still unaware of stake acquisition. Maintain cover until ground meeting." She glanced at her boarding pass again, tracing the embossed Diamond Elite with her fingertip. That status had cost her nothing compared to the price others would pay. But on this flight, it was merely the credential they needed to see, until she chose to reveal the rest. 2 rows behind, a father and teenage daughter whispered about the unfolding drama. Celeste recognized their hushed tones, curiosity mixed with indignation. Perfect. She was winning the silent war of optics. Even luxury travelers could sense when something was off, even if they didn't yet know what. She closed her notebook and allowed her shoulders to relax. In a few minutes, she would navigate from observer to orchestrator. But for now, she remained the model of composure, legs crossed at the ankle, hands folded in her lap, eyes steady on the view outside. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing halfway status and expected arrival time. Celeste listened politely, but her mind was already on the boardroom table in Washington, D.C., where she'd present the final purchase agreement. She pictured the stunned faces of Skylux's existing leadership when she walked in. No dramatics, just quiet authority. Because real power didn't need fanfare. It spoke in contracts executed, share certificates transferred, and board votes cast. And when those papers hit the table, no one would deny her seat at the helm. A cooling breeze from the overhead vent reminded Celeste of the moment ahead. She inhaled, savoring the calm before the storm. Soon, the story of luxury and exclusion on Flight 3921 would be overshadowed by a new narrative, one where she steered the future of an entire airline industry. For now, she sat back, notebook closed, water glass half full. The plane soared onward, and so would her quiet revolution. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the seatbelt sign flickered off. For most passengers, that meant reaching for devices or requesting another snack. But in the quiet first-class cabin of Skylux Flight 3921, it fueled an entirely different kind of energy, a simmering tension that pulsed through the leather seats. Celeste Morgan sat perfectly still in seat 5A, the backrest angled just enough to let her survey the room without seeming obvious. She watched Brittany hover by Lydia Whitford's side, offering fresh linen napkins and a taste of Dom Perignon. But Lydia's gaze, sharp as obsidian, remained locked on Celeste. "Honestly," Lydia drawled, swirling the champagne in her flute, "I never thought I'd see the day when someone like her would dare sit up here." The words fell like shards of glass. A hush rippled through nearby rows. Even the flight attendants paused mid-step, their trays heavy with amenities. Celeste didn't flinch. Instead, she took a slow breath, felt the smooth leather armrest beneath her fingertips, and allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. Not out of mockery, she simply knew the game, and she knew how it ended. Brittany leaned in, her professional warmth slightly strained. "Miss Morgan, would you like to—" Celeste interrupted softly but firmly. "No, thank you, Brittany. Everything's fine here." Brittany's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but she nodded and retreated. On the other side of the aisle, a man in row 3A, corporate consultant by his tag, whispered to his companion, "She's handling that so well. You can see she's not rattled." His companion, a retired judge traveling with a stack of legal briefs, responded in a low tone, "She's a real CEO type, calm under pressure." Celeste overheard but remained motionless. Observing how those around her perceived the injustice was part of her plan. Every glance, every whisper, every furtive recording was a piece of evidence she'd use later. Lydia cleared her throat and addressed the cabin with theatrical exasperation. "Does everyone see this? I pay thousands for these seats. So do many of you. And we're expected to just watch someone who doesn't belong take our place?" A few heads nodded. A phone in row 2 lifted to record Lydia's performance, the lens capturing her smiling cruelty. The man next to Celeste raised his eyebrows as if to say, "You see this?" Celeste shifted in her seat and leaned forward. She tapped her laptop open but didn't type. Instead, she tucked her hair behind her ear and let the soft hum of the engines fill the silence. Brittany returned with a small plate of smoked salmon canapes. She offered it to Celeste with a gentle smile. "Here you go, Miss Morgan. I hope this makes up for the seat confusion. Celeste took one canapé, bit into the delicate salmon and cream cheese, and closed her eyes briefly to savor the combination. "Thank you. It's delicious," she said, her tone unhurried. Lydia scoffed loudly. "You really can get anything when you have the right connections, can't you?" The phrase hung in the air. Right connections. A thinly veiled accusation that Celeste had no business being there. But to Celeste, it was confirmation that her presence was far more potent than any headline. She placed the canapé back on her plate and spoke up, her voice measured and clear. "Actually, this seat was booked in my name 3 weeks ago. Double-checked even. You might try that next time before assuming." A collective murmur rose, some in agreement, some in sympathy. A few still loyal to Lydia's clique. Brittany looked pained, caught between protocol and the steady confidence radiating from Celeste. That's when Celeste's phone buzzed with a secure message. "Board meeting confirmed. Stake transfer effective in 10 minutes. Prepare for takeover." Celeste tapped read, then slipped the phone back into her bag. It was time. From her vantage point, she watched as Lydia's expression flickered. Surprise, now uncertainty. The performance of entitlement had met its match in quiet authority. Celeste took a moment to gather her composure. She closed her eyes and inhaled deeply, centering herself. When she opened them, her gaze was calm, unwavering. "Excuse me," she said, raising her voice, still soft but carrying an unmistakable edge. "I believe the cabin crew has a policy about addressing verified ticket holders." Brittany swallowed, glanced at her tablet, then back at Celeste. "Yes, Miss Morgan, and you are correct. My apologies." A ripple of astonishment spread. Some passengers straightened in their seats, as if they'd just witnessed a courtroom ruling. Lydia's forced smile faded. She leaned back, clutching her flute. For the first time, she looked uncertain. Celeste gathered her laptop and phone, then stood gracefully in the aisle. "Thank you, Brittany," she said, and offered a brief nod to the other passengers. "Enjoy your flight." Then she walked toward the curtain at the front of the cabin, every step deliberate. Behind her, Lydia sputtered, "Oh, you can't just—" But no one listened. The cabin's focus had shifted. Celeste passed row 1, where a few crew members peered at her through the divider. She gave them a nod that said, "What just happened?" Beyond the curtain, she stepped into the small lounge at the front of the plane. The walls were lined with skylights, and a soft glow illuminated the crew rest area. She closed the small door quietly, then pulled out her phone. A few last taps on the secure app, and the final command went out. "Execute board transfer. Activate clause for non-rehire and non-service across all subsidiaries." She tucked her phone away and returned to her seat, her movements fluid, composed, unhurried. As she settled back into 5A, the cabin buzzed with quiet excitement. Passengers whispered. Crew exchanged glances. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. Lydia Whitford sat where Celeste once had, but now her throne was hollow. Celeste leaned forward, opened her laptop, and typed a new note. "Conflict escalated. Course correction underway. Next step, boardroom debrief." She hit save, closed the laptop, and exhaled. Above the gentle rumble of the engines, Flight 3921 carried on, toward Washington, D.C., and toward a new era in the airline's history. Celeste Morgan had just elevated a seating spat into a full-blown corporate coup, and no one on board would ever look at a first-class seat the same way again. The cabin lights were soft now, and the hum of the engines felt almost melodic. For the first time since takeoff, Celeste Morgan allowed herself a moment of stillness. She sat back in 5A, the plush leather cradling her posture just so. Around her, the first-class service carried on as usual. Passengers sipped champagne, flipped through amenity kits, and scrolled through in-flight entertainment. Yet for Celeste, every polite smile and hushed whisper only sharpened her resolve. She reached into her leather tote and pulled out her laptop. The sleek device felt like an extension of her own mind, powerful, precise, and discreet. With a few taps on the screen, She unlocked a secure Morgan Equinox portal and entered her credentials. The login screen gave way to a dashboard laden with charted share prices, pending contracts, and, most importantly, the acquisition pipeline for Skylux Airlines. No one watching from the aisle could have guessed that behind Celeste's composed expression, a corporate upheaval was about to be set in motion. She took a breath, recalling how Brittany had insisted she move seats, how Lydia Whitford had flaunted entitlement like a badge. That memory ignited a spark of satisfaction. It was time to turn the tables. In the text field labeled Transaction Instructions, Celeste typed deliberately, PGSQL Sao Chep Chin Sua Execute Acquisition, 51% controlling interest in Skylux Airlines. Activate termination clause for current first-class crew on Flight 3921. Authorize non-rehire protocol across partner carriers, JetLink, Aero West, Nova Fleet. Confirm all regulatory filings to be completed pre-landing. She paused only to review each line, making sure the language was unambiguous. Then she pressed Send. The gentle click of the virtual button felt like the drop of a judge's gavel. Her phone buzzed seconds later with a secure message. Morgan Equinox Corporate Services. Transaction received. Executing now. Estimated completion, 8 minutes until effective control. Celeste allowed herself a small, private smile. Thank you, she murmured, though there was no one to hear her except the passing flight attendant, whose polished routine carried her past without a glance. A couple of seats over, a businessman in a navy blazer adjusted his reading glasses. He glanced toward Celeste's open laptop, noticed the flashing confirmation, then leaned in to whisper to his wife, "Did you see that? I think she just took over the airline." Her wife's eyes widened. "Must be a technical glitch," she whispered back, but her voice trembled. The realization rippled through the cabin. Heads turned. Phones discreetly recorded the calm figure in 5A, who seemed to be rewriting the rules of privilege. Celeste minimized the Morgan Equinox portal and opened a generic spreadsheet, an elegant cover. To anyone watching, she looked like a savvy executive reviewing Q2 projections. But in her mind, she was miles away, mentally preparing for the boardroom storm that would greet her upon landing. A soft chime indicated another update. Regulatory notice. 51% stake confirmed. Board control activated. Reporting chain aligned to designate Celeste Morgan as interim chairperson. The language was clinical, but the impact was seismic. Celeste folded her hands and surveyed her surroundings. Brittany, distributing warm towels to neighboring passengers, seemed preoccupied. Lydia, glass halfway to her lips, offered a puzzled look toward the curtain separating first class from the crew rest area. It was poetic, in a way. Lydia had assumed power simply by privilege. Celeste claimed hers with precision and strategy. No shouting, no confrontation. Just a keyboard and the unspoken weight of billions of dollars. Celeste reached for her water glass. A simple gesture, but one she always performed to ground herself. She took a measured sip and set it down, gaze steady on the aisle. Privacy screens on seat consoles automatically refreshed, but her screen remained dim. Perfect. From her vantage point, she watched the reactions unfold. A flight attendant paused mid-step and glanced at a colleague, eyebrows raised. A nearby passenger tapped at their tablet, fingers flying over the screen. The soft crackle of in-flight Wi-Fi transmitted her takeover to news wires within minutes, though no public headline would launch until she chose. Celeste allowed the moment to stretch. In that silence, she felt the satisfying click of invisible gears turning in the airline's machinery. She wasn't here to gloat. She was here to correct a system that had learned to privilege entitlement over equity. In her world, respect wasn't granted by social connections or whispered bribes, but by merit and proper procedure. Finally, she closed the laptop, tucking it beside her on the seat. She sat upright, shoulders back, chin lifted, exactly the posture Lydia had never shown. She let her fingers rest lightly on her bag, her wedding band catching the soft cabin light. A reminder that some legacies were deeper than finances. As the captain's voice came on to announce the descent into Washington, D.C., Celeste smiled to herself. The final piece was in place. Flight 3921's crew, who had scoffed at her mere presence, would soon learn they no longer had a career in the skies. And yet, they'd done their part, documenting every patronizing remark, every misplaced apology. The evidence would be undeniable. Celeste leaned back and closed her eyes for a moment, savoring a quiet sense of justice. There was still work ahead. The lobbies of Skylux headquarters, the surprised faces of executives, and the solidarity of her own team as they guided the company into a new era. But right now, as the plane began its descent, she simply appreciated the serene aftermath of her silent counterattack. In just a few minutes, the cabin would transform from a battleground of whispered prejudice into the stage for a corporate coup. And Celeste Morgan would emerge not as a victim, but as a leader who wielded power without raising her voice, just as she always had. The cabin lights had settled into their late morning glow when Lydia Whitford finally allowed herself a truly satisfied smile. Brittany, the head flight attendant, glided up with a silver tray bearing a chilled bottle of Dom Perignon and 2 crystal flutes. With a practiced flourish, Brittany popped the cork, and the bubbles tumbled over in a perfect hush. "To celebration," Lydia said, voice rich and unhurried as she lifted her glass. "Isn't it wonderful when everyone knows their place?" Her words rang like a verdict. Nearby passengers stiffened, some raising curious eyebrows. A discreet murmur rippled through the cabin. Brittany poured the champagne, her smile polite but strained. "Absolutely, Miss Whitford. It's, always our pleasure to accommodate your preferences." "Preferences," Lydia repeated, clinking her glass against Brittany's. The faint ting echoed. Celeste Morgan watched from 5A, expression serene through the curtain of her hair. Around them, the crew whispered. 2 flight attendants passing hors d'oeuvres leaned in conspiratorially. "She didn't even argue," one said, voice barely above a whisper. "Most people would have made a scene." "True," the other replied, shaking her head. "I half expected her to shout or storm off. But nothing." Their voices held a mixture of relief and incredulity. For Brittany's team, Celeste's calm had been easier to manage than chaos. Yet even in relief, there was a hint of admiration. Celeste caught snippets of their voices, proof that her quiet poise had made an impression. Lydia, cocktail in hand, sank into her 1D seat as though settling onto a throne. She took a slow sip, eyes half closed, savoring the effervescence. "You know," she said, glancing at Celeste's vacant 1D, "some people mistake silence for weakness." She smiled, knowingly, then turned to Brittany. "Tell me, darling, does it ever get old? Catering to these half-measures who think they deserve more than they paid for?" Brittany's eyelids fluttered, caught between nodding and offering a rebuttal. She chose the safer path. "We aim to deliver consistent excellence, Miss Whitford." Lydia laughed softly, a sound that could freeze wine. "Consistency," she repeated. "That's why I fly Skylux. I know what to expect. Top-tier seats, flawless service, and no surprises." Celeste watched every nuance. The way Lydia's left hand flexed around the stem, the tilt of her chin, the way Brittany flinched at that casual condescension. Celeste didn't flinch. She sipped her ginger lemonade instead, its warm spice grounding her thoughts. A passenger in 2C leaned over to his companion. "She's brutal, isn't she?" he murmured, "like a queen among peasants." The companion nodded, eyes darting to Celeste's row. "But that other woman, she's nothing like us. Still, she had every right." Celeste caught the exchange. Good. The more everyone spoke, the more evidence she gathered. Every whispered judgment, every astonished look added richness to the dossier she was building. Behind the curtain, crew members exchanged texts and quick glances. One junior flight attendant stared at Brittany, wide-eyed. "Do you think she'll say something back?" Brittany shook her head. "Not her style. She's calculating." Calculating. That was generous, Celeste thought. Precise planning, quiet confidence, decisive action, far beyond mere calculation. Lydia finished her glass and set it on the tray table with a delicate clink. "Another?" she asked. Her tone suggested that no one ever dared refuse her. Brittany hesitated a heartbeat too long. "Certainly." She reached for the bottle. Celeste watched the small tableau unfold. Entitlement on full display. Compliance bowed in polite deference. It was a scene she'd orchestrated with a single keystroke half an hour ago. She folded her notebook closed and tucked it into her tote, then picked up her boarding pass and glanced at the time. 10:18 a.m. 9 minutes until the acquisition finalized. In 9 minutes, every privilege Lydia depended on would crumble. Lydia smoothed her suit jacket and turned to a fellow passenger. "I can't imagine life without this level of service," she said conspiratorially. "It's the little indulgences that make the world go round, don't you agree?" Her seatmate nodded vigorously. "Absolutely. Everyone should know their station." Celeste's lips curved into a faint smile. They would soon learn about stations and who controlled them. Brittany returned with 2 more flutes. As Lydia's assistant poured, Brittany glanced at Celeste's closed laptop, then up at Celeste's composed face. There was a flash of something. Remorse? Regret? Recognition? Whatever it was, it vanished almost instantly as Brittany turned away. Lydia raised her glass again. "To Skylux," she toasted, "and to those who keep it running smoothly." A few passengers lifted glasses in return. The crew smiled and bowed their heads in acknowledgement. Celeste took one last sip of her lemonade, then set the glass down. She picked up her phone and tapped the secure app icon. A confirmation message appeared. "Personnel Authority Clause activated. Flight 3921 crew will be removed upon landing." She tapped OK. No fanfare, no drama. Just the irrevocable click of power. At that moment, the seatbelt sign flickered on, indicating the descent had begun. The cabin hush deepened, passengers settling in for arrival. Lydia, still basking in her triumph, didn't notice Brittany's quick, worried glance toward the cockpit curtain, nor did she hear the first soft ping of incoming notifications on other phones. Celeste watched the cabin transform from entitlement stage to anticipation's hush. The same people who had cheered Lydia's supremacy would soon witness its end. She closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, feeling the weight of her own progression. From invisible observer to silent arbiter. In that briefest instant, she visualized what came next. The boardroom, the stunned faces, the headlines. Then she opened her eyes, calm and steady. The champagne glasses sat half full on nearby trays, a testament to Lydia's complacency. But complacency would be the downfall today, because in 9 minutes, the power balance in this cabin and across an entire airline would shift forever. The cabin's soft overhead lights gave way to a gentle afternoon glow as Flight 3921 cruised at 35,000 feet. Celeste Morgan sat poised in 5A, her phone nestled in her lap. Around her, passengers leaned into their screens or dozed in the ambient hush. But at that precise moment, something extraordinary was unfolding dozens of miles below her. A quiet buzz rose through Skylux Airlines headquarters in downtown Chicago. The trading floor-style open office space was unusually tense. Analysts at long tables stared at multiple monitors displaying share prices. The ticker for Skylux Airlines, SKX, flashed in pulsing green. It had jumped 17% in the last 5 minutes. "Come on, what's causing this spike?" muttered Naomi Patel, the head of investor relations, tapping at her keyboard. She scrolled through real-time feeds, eyes narrowing at the news aggregator. A secure alert popped up on her phone. Urgent. Control transfer confirmation. 51% stake acquired by Morgan Equinox Capital. Interim chairperson, Celeste Morgan. Board meeting in 20 minutes. Her gulp echoed in the quiet. She shot a glance to the CFO's office glazed glass. Beyond it, Richard Williams, the longtime CEO of Skylux, was in the middle of back-to-back conference calls. Naomi exhaled and jabbed at her headset mic. "Richard, we've just received notice. Morgan Equinox has 51% of our shares. Celeste Morgan is our new interim chair. They're calling an emergency board meeting upon landing." Across the room, the CFO froze mid-sip of coffee. His headset crackled. "You're kidding, right? That can't be live yet. We have until end of day to close." Naomi shook her head. "It's done. I have the transaction ID. It executed at 10:27 a.m. CT. There's no reversal clause. They triggered the controlling interest clause." Richard Williams's voice came over the speakerphone, sharper than a lightning bolt. "Patch me through to Morgan Equinox's counsel, now." Back in the cabin, Celeste's secure app lit up with a confirmation banner. "Control transfer complete. Reporting, interim chairperson Celeste Morgan. Emergency board meeting scheduled upon landing." She tapped acknowledge and tucked the phone away. In her chest, her heart beat a steady 68. It felt almost serene. Celeste closed her laptop, its screen now blank except for the Skylux logo emblazoned across the landing page. The luxury of first class enveloped her. But in this moment, she felt no indulgence, only purpose. She straightened, smoothed the lapel of her tailored black jacket, and let her gaze sweep the cabin. Passengers whispered among themselves. Phones lifted to record more than their champagne toasts. Brittany paused mid-corridor, noticed Celeste's composed return to form, and nodded slightly, an unspoken acknowledgement that something enormous was unfolding. Celeste leaned back in her seat, crossed her legs at the ankle, and allowed herself a single, small smile. Mission 1, she thought. Observation and planning. Completed. At Skylux headquarters, Richard Williams stalked into the boardroom. Thick glass walls revealed a dozen senior executives already gathered. General counsel, head of operations, communications director, and a few board members. All wore expressions oscillating between shock and fury. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard began, voice taut, "we have an unprecedented situation. This morning, Morganell Equinox Capital acquired 51% voting rights in our company. They are in control effective immediately." A hush fell. Someone cleared their throat. "Mr. Williams," said Patricia Chang, chair of the audit committee, "how is this possible? We had advanced warning of their interest. We even prepared counter-proposals." Richard ran a hand through his salt and pepper hair. "Apparently not quickly enough. They executed a hostilisim takeover clause buried in our shareholder agreements. As of now, Ms. Morgan is interim chair." The general counsel, David Lee, stood and clicked his pen. "We need a strategy. Call a shareholders meeting upon Flight 3921's arrival. Freeze board actions. Communicate with regulators. Issue a public statement. Careful wording." Patricia tapped her notes. "We must comply legally. If we resist, they can call in equity provisions to nullify our entire governance." Richard nodded grimly. "Prepare the meeting agenda. Summon every board member with voting power and find out how they bypassed our lockup provisions." He paused. "Also, get me the transcript logs of that flight. I want to know exactly what she did on board." Back on Air 3921, a soft chime signaled the captain's voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into DC. Please return to your seats and fasten seatbelts." The seatbelt signs flickered on. Celeste heard the familiar ping on her phone, automated updates from her acquisition team. Regulatory filings filed, board seat notifications dispatched. Landing timeline secured. She tapped read, but let her phone rest unseen in her lap. The cabin's ambient hum settled into a gentle drone. Passengers shifted in their seats, strapping in. Celeste folded her hands. Ahead lay the final act, meeting the very people who once dismissed her. People who'd felt so comfortable kicking her out of 1D that they never imagined she'd become their boss. She inhaled the cabin's recycled air with the calm assurance of someone who knows the outcome. Below her, Skylux's boardroom was in crisis control mode. The corporate headquarters would be scrambling to salvage what they could. But in 20 minutes, Celeste would walk into that world with full authority. No more whispers or waits. She leaned forward to close the little window shade beside her. The afternoon sun dimmed the cabin, casting soft shadows across her profile. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to remember the flights she'd taken as a child with her father, the dreams they'd sketched together. Then she straightened. Tonight, Skylux Airlines would have a new story to tell, one of accountability, equity, and a boardroom reborn. And it began with a single message sent at cruising altitude. She got kicked out of her seat, and 5 minutes later, she owns the airline. Too much or totally deserved? Comment below, Team Celeste or Team Protocol. As Flight 3921 taxied toward the gate, Celeste Morgan's lips curved into a confident smile. The next chapter would be written below, but she had already claimed her seat at the table, and this time, everyone would have to follow protocol. By the time Flight 3921 taxied to its gate, Celeste Morgan's phone was humming with notifications. She lifted it subtly, glancing at the screen to see a single pulsating alert. "At this seat is mine" is now #1 worldwide trend on X. Her heart rate didn't budge. She'd planned for this. But even so, the speed of it all was staggering. Just minutes ago, she'd sent the final acquisition order. Now, the world was watching. Across social media, the story had exploded. "At this seat is mine. Black woman CEO removed from first class, then takes over airline. Privilege." In the sky, what happens when you kick out your boss? Diamond Elite. Gate. Skylux Airlines under fire. Short-form clips looped endlessly. Lydia's scoff, Brittany's forced smile, Celeste's serene refusal. The first person to grab the clip had been a teenager in economy class, but within 2 minutes, it was on every feed. X, formerly Twitter, Facebook, Instagram Reels, TikTok. Celeste scrolled through comments. "Did you see her pass? Diamond Elite, but they still had her move. That lady in black chairs is the one. Amazing. Legacy clients? More like outdated entitlement." And underneath, "I'd like to work in an airline run by her. She just owns the plane and the company. Respect." She slipped the phone back into her bag and exhaled softly. Around her, a few passengers leaned forward to whisper, but most were already lost in their own screens, capturing and sharing this moment. Skylux's first-class cabin, once a bubble of polite luxury, had become mission control for a corporate takeover. Meanwhile, in Skylux Airlines' Chicago headquarters, the communications war room was in full meltdown. A giant monitor on the wall cycled through. CNN banner, viral video, black CEO ejected from seat now controls airline, MSNBC. Tease. Privilege exposed. What this means for luxury travel. Fox News crawl. Skylux under siege. CEO ousted mid-flight in discrimination row. Underneath, the internal Slack channel Amber PR crisis overflowed. Laura, communications director. "We need an official statement now. Legal says risk is through the roof." Jamal, legal counsel. "Hold on drafting. Any miswording could trigger additional clauses. Waiting for final board minutes." Sophia, social media manager. "Proposals. Apologize publicly and promise independent review, or highlight policy review only." Richard Williams stormed into the room, eyes blazing. He pointed at the screen. "Why are we trailing her story? The default search results are all her angles. We need control of the narrative." Laura swallowed. "Our website just updated. Skylux acknowledges change in majority ownership. Celeste Morgan appointed interim chair. But out there, all they see is discrimination." On another screen, a live Twitter feed scrolled past faster than the human eye could track. The hashtag #Justice in the Sky was surging. Influencers with millions of followers were posting side-by-side comparisons. Who would you trust to run an airline? This lady or her? Sales data and booking sites showed a 23% drop in new first-class reservations within the hour. Investors on financial news channels were reeling. Bloomberg's ticker flashed. SKX US equity up 18%. Market reacts to merger news. A spike driven by the acquisition, not the scandal. Back on board, Celeste watched it all unfold with a quiet intensity. She had outmaneuvered decades of entrenched privilege with a few keystrokes and a level head. But her next move would cement the new era. She tapped her phone again, opening a secure message to her communications team. Deploy official release. Morgan Equinox Capital stands for equitable service. We will engage all stakeholders constructively. Prepare for press conference at 4 p.m. Ready talking points. Within seconds, her team replied, Received. Drafting now. Video of seat incident will accompany release. Celeste nodded to herself. She wanted transparency, not spin. Let the public see everything. In the media frenzy, one voice stood out. Samantha Brooks, the passenger in row 3 who'd recorded the initial exchange. She posted her full 8-minute edit on YouTube, complete with captions and a call to action. If you've ever been sidelined by bias, share your story with #ThisSeatIsMine. Within 3 hours, her video had 1.4 million views and counting. Major newspapers published editorials. The New York Times. A symptom of systemic bias, Skylux Airlines must answer. The Washington Post. From first class to boardroom, Celeste Morgan's quiet revolution. USA. Today. Passengers react to viral CEO takeover. Is luxury travel broken? Podcasters dissected every frame. Corporate journalists pored over SEC filings live on air. The skies had become global headlines. At Skylux's headquarters, the PR team finally sent out the official statement. Skylux Airlines confirms change in majority ownership, effective at 10:27 a.m. CT today. Celeste Morgan of Morgan Equinox Capital has been appointed interim chairperson. We remain committed to service excellence and will institute a comprehensive review of our customer service policies to ensure equitable treatment for all passengers. The statement landed like a tepid apology. The public clamor only intensified. Too little, too late. If you really cared about equity, you'd fire the whole crew. She's the hero we didn't know we needed. Hashtags merged. This seat is mine. #justice. In the sky. #Skylux takeover. Celeste stood in the cabin as the curtain to the upper deck opened. Flight attendants exchanged defeated glances. For them, the walls between service and leadership had collapsed. She offered a small nod to Brittany as she passed, a gesture of respect and acknowledgement. In 5 minutes, the doors would open. The media mob waiting in DC's gate lounge would see her step off not as a disgruntled passenger, but as a commanding leader. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, feeling the shift from silent strategist to visible authority. Then she straightened her shoulders, picked up her tote, and stepped into the aisle. Passengers parted respectfully, some filming. A cluster near the front burst into applause. The cabin, once a stage for entitlement, had become a theater of justice. And as she crossed into the front lounge, the echoes of "This It's Mine" and "Justice in the Sky" trailed behind her like a coronation fanfare. The world had witnessed the fall of privilege and the rise of a new CEO. The jet bridge hissed as it aligned with the forward door of Flight 3921. Below, the gate area in Washington, D.C. buzzed with reporters, crew handlers, and passengers awaiting their connecting flights. For most travelers, it was just another disembarkation. But for those on board, it was the moment when reality would catch up with the morning's upheaval. Celeste Morgan rose from seat 5A, smooth and poised. She slipped her laptop into her tote and tucked her phone away. Around her, passengers gathered their belongings, buzzing quietly about the viral meltdown that had taken over social media. A flash of cameras peeked through the curtain, anticipation crackling in the air. Brittany, the head flight attendant, was already by the door, pale-faced but maintaining her professional composure. She stepped forward and showed Celeste a text from the Skylux operations manager. Please have your crew, Flight 3921, report to Gate 12 conference room on arrival. Interim chairperson will address you. Brittany's hand trembled slightly as she lowered her phone. Miss Morgan, they want us to meet you now, she whispered. Celeste offered a gentle nod. Thank you, Brittany. Please tell them I'll see them there. Brittany exhaled, a mixture of relief and dread crossing her features. She turned to the rest of the cabin crew, her voice just loud enough. Everyone, please gather your checklists and head to Gate 12. The interim chairperson requests your presence immediately. A hush fell. Flight attendants exchanged glances, some shocked, some resigned. They gathered their clipboards, whispering as they filed past the curtain into the crew lounge. Even the junior attendants, who'd only moments ago marveled at Celeste's silence under pressure, now looked at her with a mix of reverence and apprehension. Celeste stepped through the door, allowing the brisk Washington air to wash over her. Reporters craned their necks, cameras flashing, but she ignored them. Her gaze was fixed on the long corridor leading to Gate 12. A few passengers blocked the path, phones raised. They leaned forward, eager to capture her first words off the plane. But Celeste maintained her pace, unhurried, deliberate. At the end of the hallway, the crew lounge door stood open. A small group of flight attendants, supervisors, and the captain assembled in awkward semicircle. Their faces were a spectrum of disbelief and contrition. Brittany cleared her throat and motioned for Celeste to enter. The moment the door closed, the chatter died. All eyes turned to Celeste Morgan, the unassuming passenger who had, by the gentle tap of a keystroke, become their new boss and the arbiter of their fate. Celeste waited 2 heartbeats, allowing the weight of the silence to settle. Then she spoke, voice calm but firm. Good afternoon. I appreciate you all coming on such short notice. Her tone was neutral, almost conversational, but every syllable carried authority. The captain, James Reynolds, shifted uncomfortably. His decades of command didn't prepare him for this. Their faces were a spectrum of disbelief and contrition. Brittany cleared her throat and motioned for Celeste to enter. I've reviewed the events on Flight 3921 today, Celeste continued, and I want to be perfectly clear. Respect and dignity aren't privileges, they're requirements. She paused, scanning the room. This cabin, your first-class section, is built on trust. Every passenger pays for a promise of service and safety. When that promise is broken, trust dissolves instantly. She walked slowly to the front of the room, stopping before a modest table. On it lay a folder stamped, Top Secret. She picked it up, opened it, and removed a printed sheet. The official notice of their termination. These names represent the crew responsible for today's misconduct, she said, voice steady as she held out the sheets. Brittany's eyes flicked to her own name at the top, Brittany Shaw. But there were others too. Jessica Miller, Trevor Davis, Captain James Reynolds. Murmurs rippled. A flight attendant gasped softly. Trevor Davis, the cabin supervisor, clenched his jaw, fists twitching at his sides. They had confessed their bias in plain sight that morning. Celeste was simply holding them to account. These terminations are effective immediately, Celeste said, allowing the phrase to land. In addition, our newly activated policy extends across our partner airlines. You will not be rehired at any of our affiliated carriers, JetLink, Aero West, Nova Fleet. Everyone who participated in today's actions will be held to this standard. The room felt smaller in that instant, the walls pressing in with the weight of their collective guilt. For many, this was more than losing a job. It was a public reckoning. Celeste paused, then added, I know this feels abrupt, but justice shouldn't be delayed. Your colleagues in the cabin at 5A witnessed your decisions firsthand. The passengers documented it. The world watched. Now, it's time to rebuild trust, both for Skylux and for yourselves. She stepped back and folded her arms, a posture both relaxed and unyielding. Some crew members stared at the ground, Others met her gaze with a flicker of defiance, perhaps wondering if there was any escape from accountability. Lydia Whitford, who'd followed as a civilian observer, lingered in the doorway. When she caught Celeste's eye, a flicker of realization dawned. She'd been serving a woman she didn't even know was in charge. Lydia's lips parted in shock, then pressed into a thin line. Her seat of entitlement had shifted dramatically. Celeste turned to include Lydia. "Ms. Whitford, thank you for traveling with us today. I trust you'll find that Skylux's renewed commitment to equity will enhance every journey moving forward." Lydia swallowed. I suppose I'll need to speak with your office about my next flight." Celeste inclined her head. "Our team will assist you. We want every customer treated fairly, no exceptions." With that, Celeste set the folder down, sealed the meeting with a silent nod, and turned. She walked past her former crew, once strangers who'd thought they could humiliate her, and out through the door into the fluorescent-lit corridor. As she emerged, flashes lit up the space. Reporters jabbed microphones, passengers murmured excitedly, and a handful of early arriving investors gave her approving nods. But Celeste's eyes were clear, focused on the grounded jet behind her, the same jet that had hosted her silent revolution. She paused at the base of the stairs, glanced back once, and whispered, more to herself than to anyone else, "Dignity always belongs." Then she stepped into a waiting SUV, sliding inside with the grace of someone who carried the weight of her world without strain. The vehicle pulled away, the crew lounge door closing behind her. Behind that door, lives would change, careers would end, and a new standard of service would begin. And across the city, the boardroom lights blinked on, ready for the real meeting to start. Celeste Morgan leaned back, exhaled, and gazed out the tinted window. The engines of corporate power had roared to life, powered by a single passenger's refusal to remain silent. And now they flew on her terms. Gate 12's conference room felt impossibly small under the harsh fluorescent lights. A long, sleek table dominated the center, surrounded by uncomfortable chairs. Skylux's senior leadership, department heads, legal counsel, the now former CEO Richard Williams, stood clustered at one end. Their faces were masks of disbelief, exhaustion, and something deeper, shame. Celeste Morgan entered as quietly as she could, though every eye shifted to her the moment she crossed the threshold. She paused, savoring a deep breath that tasted of victory and resolve, then stepped forward with the effortless grace of a seasoned raconteur. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, voice clear and steady. "Thank you for gathering on such short notice." She set her leather tote on the table and, with a single motion, pulled out a slim tablet. The room grew still. Brittany and the rest of Flight 3921's former crew, Jessica Miller, Trevor Davis, and Captain James Reynolds, stood to the side, their uniforms replaced by civilian attire, eyes wide. Celeste tapped the screen. Instantly, the tablet lit up with the video from Flight 3921. Brittany's polite insistence, Lydia Whitford's condescending scoff, the selective service, and Celeste's calm refusal. It played in crisp high definition, every word and gesture forever preserved. "Let me refresh your memories," Celeste said. She watched their faces as the footage replayed. Brittany's forced smile, Jessica's uneasy glances, Trevor's whispered threats, and Reynolds' silent complicity. When the video reached Lydia's infamous line, "This seat isn't for people like you," you could hear a collective intake of breath. Celeste set the tablet aside, hands folded. That cabin was more than just a stage for privilege. It was a symptom of an entire culture that prioritizes connections over competence, status over service. She looked around at the board members. But policy is policy, and today, policy has a new name. She held up a thick envelope stamped "Official Shareholder Action." "Inside this envelope," she continued, "you'll find the formal notice of my appointment as interim chairperson of Skylux Airlines, effective 10 minutes ago." She let that sink in. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Richard Williams's face blanched. You executed the takeover from 35,000 feet? Celeste nodded. My team and I did. We were granted the controlling interest clause in your shareholder agreement. It's all perfectly legal. She paused, letting the irony hang in the air. You see, while you were policing who could sit in seat 1D, you never imagined that seat 1D actually belonged to me. She laid the envelope on the table and stamped it with a flourish. Then she opened it and withdrew 4 pages. Termination orders. These are your crew, she said, gesturing toward Brittany, Jessica, Trevor, and Captain Reynolds. All terminated with cause. Additionally, our activated non-rehire clause extends across JetLink, Aero West, and Nova Fleet. They will find no landing strip in this industry. A cold hush fell. Brittany pressed her lips together, eyes glistening. Trevor squared his shoulders, refusing to let tears betray him. Jessica looked down at her shoes, shame eclipsing sorrow. Captain Reynolds, who once commanded a cabin of staff, now seemed lost without authority. Celeste continued, her tone unwavering. I do not take joy in punitive measures, but respect and dignity aren't negotiable. Every passenger who pays for service deserves it, regardless of race, gender, or privilege. She turned back to the board. And as chairperson, I'm instituting a full-service review. You will implement comprehensive bias training. You will overhaul your loyalty program to focus on transparency, not favoritism, and you will rebuild the trust you've squandered. She lifted her head, piercing their defenses with steady eye contact. I understand change is difficult, but Skylux's future depends on it. A company that punishes dignity cannot long survive in a world that demands equity. The room was silent, save for the hum of the air conditioner. Celeste set the tablet and papers aside, then tapped her watch. Our next shareholder meeting will occur in 1 hour. All current board seats are vacated pending re-election. I expect 100% attendance. She rounded the table, offering a brief nod to Brittany and the crew. Your service today was unacceptable, but each of you has a chance to rebuild. Through second chance programs we're launching industry-wide. Redemption begins with accountability. Brittany's eyes met Celeste's. In that look, there was a mixture of fear, regret, and something like gratitude. A flight attendant's uniform, no matter how polished, could never conceal cowardice. Celeste's offer of redemption was as firm as her decree of termination. Turning back to the stunned executives, Celeste delivered her final line. I didn't come here to punish. I came to set a new standard. If Skylux can't live up to its promise, it doesn't deserve its place in the skies. With that, she collected her tote and headed for the door. Cameras clicked, phones recorded. The story had come full circle, from a first-class seat dispute to a corporate awakening. As Celeste exited, Lydia Whitford, still reeling, leaned in. Do you really think this will fix things? Celeste paused, offering a measured smile. It won't fix overnight, but justice never does. It's a journey, and today was our first path toward building a fairer sky. She stepped out into the corridor where waiting media swarmed. Flashbulbs popped, microphones thrust forward. But Celeste lifted a hand in a calm wave, then disappeared behind the gates, her next chapter already in motion. The membership badges lay scattered on the polished conference table, Brittany's flight attendant wings, Jessica's name tag, Trevor's cabin supervisor pin, and Captain Reynolds's polished epaulets. All of it now mere souvenirs of a once coveted status, discarded in the aftermath of Celeste Morgan's decisive decree. Moments earlier, Celeste had sealed their fates with a few calm words. Immediate termination and an industry-wide ban from JetLink, Aero West, and Nova Fleet. But listening to the stunned silence in that room, the weight of her orders only truly sank in now. Brittany Shaw, whose practiced courtesy had masked a capacity for blind compliance, stood rigid by the door. Her uniform, crisp navy slacks and blazer, suddenly looked too formal, like armor she no longer needed. She swallowed hard, blinking away tears. When she finally spoke, her voice trembled. Ma'am, I understand. Across the table, Jessica Miller, head flight attendant on Flight 3921, pressed her lips together as though trying to hold back an ocean of regret. Her eyes brimmed with unshed tears. She had been celebrated for her composure and tact, but today, those same soft skills were exposed as complicity. She nodded once, slowly, as if apologizing to every passenger who watched her walk Celeste toward her seat that morning. Trevor Davis, the cabin supervisor whose authority rivaled that of any corporate enforcer in first class, clenched and unclenched his fists. His knuckles whitened. Today, he would lose his career, his reputation, and perhaps his livelihood. He cleared his throat. "Miss Morgan, I apologize for my conduct." The words sounded hollow to his own ears. Even Captain James Reynolds, who had always towered above turbulence and emergency protocols, stood with shoulders stooped. 35 years of flying luxury jets, saving lives and commanding respect, all undone by a moment of indifference. He folded his flight cap in his hands and met Celeste's gaze. I'm sorry." Celeste watched them, her expression calm yet resolute. She understood the human cost of her orders, but she also knew that no apology could restore the dignity they had stripped from her and from countless passengers before. "I accept your apologies," she said, "but actions have consequences. Skylux Airlines must rebuild trust, and that starts with accountability." She turned to address the room at large, the board members, legal counsel, and department heads who'd witnessed the dismantling of privilege. Effective immediately, these individuals, Brittany Shaw, Jessica Miller, Trevor Davis, and Captain James Reynolds, are no longer employed by Skylux Airlines. Additionally, the ban on rehire across our partner carriers remains in effect without exception. A heavy tension filled the room as the executives processed what they'd just heard. Some opened their mouths to protest the severity. Others glanced at the papers on the table, confirming that the proper clauses had indeed been invoked. The General Counsel stepped forward, voice careful. "Ms. Morgan, we will process the terminations and coordinate with HR to ensure compliance. We'll also inform our partners about the non-rehire clauses." Celeste nodded. "Good. I want a public announcement within 2 hours. No sugarcoating. Transparency is essential." She paused, then added, "I understand this is difficult, but this isn't personal. It's about restoring faith in our brand. Skylux should stand for service, respect, and integrity, values you pledge to uphold." She took a breath and looked back at the 4 former crew members. "You will receive separation agreements in due course, including severance as per policy. But beyond that, I encourage you to pursue the Second Chance program we're launching. It's designed not just to train, but to transform. It may be the only way to rebuild your careers honorably." Brittany's head dipped. "Thank you, Miss Morgan. She paused, searching for words. "I never realized how blind I'd been." Jessica swallowed. "I want to learn from this. I want to do better." Days turned into weeks. Internal surveys showed a 60% drop in reported bias incidents. Customer feedback lauded the new level of attentiveness. No more whispered side comments or unearned deference. And the broader industry took notice. Competing airlines invited Skylux trainers to share best practices, while civil rights groups hailed the move as historic. At Right Tech Solutions, Celeste's phone rang steady with invitations, keynote speeches, panel discussions, even televised interviews. But she reserved most of her time for Sparkfly, Skylux's newly formed advisory council, where she worked alongside former colleagues and fresh faces to embed equity into every policy. One evening, as the sun set over Boston's Beacon Hill, Celeste reflected on the journey. She thought of her father's napkin sketches, of every boardroom she'd walked into, and of the moment Brittany had first smiled in awkward apology at 35,000 feet. Each memory was a thread in the tapestry of change they were weaving. Celeste opened her journal app and wrote a final entry. "True justice isn't served by retribution. It's forged through accountability, empathy, and the courage to evolve." Today, Skylux's wings carry more than passengers. They carry our shared dignity. And that's a flight path I'll always support. She tapped save, closed her laptop, and watched the last rays of light fade. The sky outside her window turned deep indigo, flecked with the promise of tomorrow's dawn. In the end, the story of Flight 3921 wasn't just about a seat dispute. It was about changing hearts and systems, quietly, determinedly, and forever. And for Celeste Morgan, that was the true power of justice in the air. True justice isn't served by retribution. It's forged through accountability, empathy, and the courage to evolve. Today, Skylux's wings carry more than passengers. They carry our shared dignity. Celeste said, "Dignity is non-negotiable." Do you agree? If that line hit you too, comment, "Respect over privilege." She tapped save, closed her laptop, and watched the last rays of sunlight fade. Outside her window, the sky shifted from pale amber to deep indigo, flecked with stars, heralding a new dawn. In these quiet moments, she reflected on how a single refusal to bow had rippled into a corporate awakening. Flight 3921 no longer symbolized misplaced privilege, but marked the turning point of an industry. Beneath the veneer of luxury, Celeste had proven that respect is non-negotiable. As the city lights twinkled below, she rose from her desk, resolved to carry this momentum forward. The world had witnessed justice in the air, and now it belonged to everyone. Later that afternoon, Celeste retreated to her temporary office overlooking Lake Michigan. She opened her laptop and began drafting an email to every Skylux employee. Subject: a new chapter for Skylux. Dear team, yesterday's announcement marks only the beginning. Over the next 48 hours, you will engage in training that may challenge you more than any technical skill exercise. Embrace it. Approach every roleplay with honesty. Listen when your peers share painful stories. Reflect on moments when you might have looked the other way. Second Chance isn't just a program. It's a promise that we believe people can grow beyond their mistakes. I ask you to participate fully and carry this mindset forward into every cabin, every customer interaction, and every boardroom meeting. Thank you for your courage, your commitment, and your willingness to change. Together, we will restore trust and build an airline that honors every passenger's dignity. Sincerely, Celeste Morgan, Interim Chairperson, Skylux Airlines. She paused, reread the words, and clicked send. A quiet satisfaction washed over her. The roadmap was clear, the tone set, the mission underway. Days turned into weeks. Internal surveys showed a 60% drop in reported bias incidents. Customer feedback lauded the new level of attentiveness. No more whispered side comments or unearned deference. And the broader industry took notice. Competing airlines invited Skylux trainers to share best practices, while civil rights groups hailed the move as historic. At Right Tech Solutions, Celeste's phone rang steady with invitations, keynote speeches, panel discussions, even televised interviews. But she reserved most of her time for SparkFly, Skylux's newly formed advisory council, where she worked alongside former colleagues and fresh faces to embed equity into every policy. One evening, as the sun set over Boston's Beacon Hill, Celeste reflected on the journey. She thought of her father's napkin sketches, of every boardroom she'd walked into, and of the moment Brittany had first smiled in awkward apology at 35,000 feet. Each memory was a thread in the tapestry of change they were weaving. Celeste opened her journal app and wrote a final entry. True justice isn't served by retribution. It's forged through accountability, empathy, and the courage to evolve. Today, Skylux's wings carry more than passengers. They carry our shared dignity. And that's a flight path I'll always support. She tapped save, closed her laptop, and watched the last rays of light fade. The sky outside her window turned deep indigo, flecked with the promise of tomorrow's dawn. In the end, The story of Flight 3921 wasn't just about a seat dispute. It was about changing hearts and systems, quietly, determinedly, and forever. And for Celeste Morgan, that was the true power of justice in the air. True justice isn't served by retribution. It's forged through accountability, empathy, and the courage to evolve. Today, Skylux's wings carry more than passengers. They carry our shared dignity. Celeste said, "Dignity is non-negotiable." Do you agree? If that line hit you too, comment, "Respect over privilege." She tapped save, closed her laptop, and watched the last rays of sunlight fade. Outside her window, the sky shifted from pale amber to deep indigo, flecked with stars heralding a new dawn. In these quiet moments, she reflected on how a single refusal to bow had rippled into a corporate awakening. Flight 3921 no longer symbolized misplaced privilege, but marked the turning point of an industry. Beneath the veneer of luxury, Celeste had proven that respect is non-negotiable. As the city lights twinkled below, she rose from her desk, resolved to carry this momentum forward. The world had witnessed justice in the air, and now it belonged to everyone.